3.5 years ago, I made this drawing, and it's horrifying. But at the time, I said word for word that this was the best thing I had ever drawn. This is the drawing I was recreating, which I made when I was like 8. They both suck, that is not up for debate. But today I have good news for this long-forgotten OC of 8-year-old me. We're gonna give her a little bit of a redo, while I talk about all the things I did wrong and how I fixed them in the redraw. Okay, first I'm gonna start off with my critique of the old piece, the colored one. First of all, you can see how bad my anatomy was at the time. The only thing sort of in the right place is the ears, and I think that was just luck. Other than that, the nose is really small and way too high on the face. The mouth is way too low. Generally, you want the mouth to be a little higher than the midpoint between the nose and the bottom of the chin. Her eyes are way too long. They seem to be falling off her face. The eyes are also supposed to be about 1 eye apart. These ones are way too close, especially for the style I was trying to recreate. And the eyebrows are just little lines, so there's that. Next, you know we have to talk about this horrendous shading. There is no light source, but seemingly about 5 that don't work with each other at all. The hair looks like it's been glued to her scalp, except her braid, which looks like a bunch of stacked boomerangs. We have a lot to fix. The clothes are not the worst part of this piece, so there's that going for me, but they aren't good by any means. The shading is, of course, illogical and random, and the shape doesn't make a lot of sense. Right, let's get to redrawing this. First, I'm gonna find a pose reference because the straight shoulder line plus the straight eye line makes it very boring. Let me show you what I mean. These lines are parallel to each other, which makes the composition very boring. If you tilt these lines, or even just one of them, you can make the piece that much more interesting. And this is the reference I found. It's got a new perspective. The eye line and shoulder line are tilted against each other and it has very clear lighting. Okay, so I think I'm ready to start sketching. I drew the head and then I sat there wondering why it was so blurry, and then I looked at the size of the canvas. I was using a 600 by 900 pixel canvas. Anyway, I resized it and finished up the sketch, and now I'm sketching in the hair. I'm drawing the shape of the braid as a long box. It's easier to simplify the shape right now and render out the details of the braid later. Here's the final sketch. I changed her shirt a bit since it was very boring, and I gave her a tattoo of some sort of leaf vine symbol thing. Before I color anything, I use 2 gray tones to color in the character and the background. This helps give me a base for working on and allows me to pick better colors for the character in contrast with the background and the lighting. And now it's time for the best part, rendering. I always render the skin first. The first thing I do to render is lay down the base color. This one is slightly different than the original piece. As a general tip for drawing darker skin, you want the colors to slowly get more red. This applies to shadows too. Now I'm giving her some blush, and I'm using a dark saturated red for this. I'm going to use a linear burn layer for the shadows. I prefer this to multiply, but you can change out their uses for different lighting situations. Next, I use an add glow layer for the lighting. It's pretty simple. I just paint the lighting and a clipping mask layer onto the skin. And never forget to use this little trick. Pick a bright saturated orange, or just use bright saturated orange, and draw in a big line along the edge of the light and the shadow, and set the layer to soft light and set the opacity to somewhere under 50%. This makes the skin rendering look way better and way more realistic, even if you're not going for a realistic style. Then it's on to rendering the lips. Drawing lips has been pretty easy for me. It used to be really bad, as you can see by the original drawing, but I've definitely gotten better at it. For this character, I'm going to make her top lip darker and less saturated than her bottom. Let me know if you'd like to see a lip tutorial at some point. I'm going to draw the shirt next. I draw a general outline of the shape and fill it with the bucket tool. You'll notice I chose a less hideous shade of green for her shirt this time. After getting the general shape down, I start shading the edges with a darker, more saturated color. Then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the skin and use an add glow layer to block in how the light should fall on her clothes. I had to change the color of the light a few times to make it match to the shirt color, but we got there eventually. After I merged down the layer, I used the color picker tool and the brush to bring the color down to better represent the light and how it interacts with the folds of the clothes. I'll use the linear burn layer again to represent the shadows. Then I'll draw in a couple of clothes wrinkles. I'm trying to visualize how the wrinkles would form on this piece of cloth, but I'm struggling a bit. I don't really study clothes as much as I should be. Onto the hair. As usual, I block in the main color and then start doing the shadows. I do one on her hairline as well as parts the light source won't reach. I'm also going to do a smaller shadow around the bangs to show them as a different area than the rest of the hair. Here I'm adjusting the angle of the bottom of her hair. It seemed a bit crooked and gravity defying. Next I'm going to add some more texture into the hair, little strands. And now my favorite part, add glow. I add another layer and go in with the brush, following the same lines as the skin lighting. I'm also adding a light to the other side of the hairline to add some dimension to the shape of the hair. I'm blending it out and adding darker shadows as well as some orange in the light, and then I'm bringing the shadows into the light and the light towards the hairline. Time for the braid. I'm honestly scared for this part. I don't draw braids very often, and when I do, they aren't normally large braids. I start off with this Y shape as this is the easiest way for me to draw a braid that I currently know of. Then I'm going to expand the sides to make it less boxy. The shading is both the hardest and easiest part. If you know how to do it, no problem, but I'm a bit rusty, so it took me a couple minutes to get back into the pattern of painting braids. I use a mix of lighter colors and darker colors and just blend them out together. It takes a while and it's kind of tedious, but it's super worth it. I mean, look at this! I drew this! It's not perfect, but compared to the original, I think the winner is obvious. After I'm mostly done with the hair, I gave the nose a shadow and then the thing that brings it all together, the eyes. I block in the whites of the eye first on its own layer, then trace the outline at the top and bottom for the lash line. I also add an extra bit at the end for the top lash line, curving down like this to I cannot talk today. Represent the fold of the eye. I add 2 little red dots to the corner for like the fleshy bit, like the tear duct. And then I use 2 large circles for the irises. It's important to make sure these line up before erasing the parts that will be hidden. It's kind of a lot harder to fix later on, I'm speaking from experience. After they're even with each other, I erase the parts that should be hidden by the eyelid. And now it is finally time to color the eyes. The first thing I do is add a drop shadow on top of the iris, as well as one that reaches around it. I also make sure to add a small ball of darker color for what will later be the pupil of the eye. Then I go back in and redarken those same shadows, which will make them look more three-dimensional. Now I can add the pupil, and this might be a hot take, but use black for this. I know some people will say never use black in your art, but if you know why you're doing it and you use it cautiously, I think it's fine for this. In addition to this, I also support using pure white in your drawings. I use pure white for the eye highlights. Maybe there's a better color, who knows? Maybe that will change as I continue to improve, but for now I'm using pure white to reflect the light source. Now, eyelashes are the funnest thing for me to draw personally. I really love drawing like really giant, exaggerated eyelashes. They aren't very hard to draw. If you'd like to try it yourself, just 2 lines in a sweeping motion. Try to be loose with them, the lines don't have to be rigid, and will actually look better if they're like long and like loose. After I finish the eyelashes, I'm kind of almost done with the eyes, but they didn't look quite right, so I put in some brighter colors near the base and filled the pupil with a lighter green, and this is how the eyes are looking. Now we're in the final stretch. Details. I'm drawing on the vine tattoo and adding some little finishing details to her face and clothes. The liquify tool is my savior, and there is no way I could have finished this drawing without it. Here's the finished drawing. It's definitely a severe improvement from the one I did 3 years ago, but I still have a long ways to go because honestly, I don't really like this piece. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe if you are interested to see how much I can progress from here. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Goodbye.